here's number two that my daughter told me about anxiety. And she mentioned this in our podcast interview, that she put on a really good facade. I'm biased, but I think my daughter's beautiful and she presents really well. She's sweet. She's kind. She's never in trouble at school. She enjoyed school in high school and she wanted to appear normal because doesn't everybody, but also even more so, don't teenagers just want to fit in? So the facade of acting like you are all okay and you're really not. This actually came out in my research of I have alluded before to my doctoral research at a youth psychiatric unit. And one of the things I found all the time from these teenagers that were with me with a plethora of mental health disorders is you want to appear normal. So anxiety, to understand it, just know people want to hide it. I'm hoping that's changing and we're losing that stigma, but it is a very real phenomenon that I saw over and over. Teenagers want to fit in, desperately want to fit in, and they don't want people to know. So even being aware that there is a facade to be presented, and if you do know somebody with anxiety or you're parenting a child with anxiety, being aware that they're not necessarily going to be totally open about it, or that they might hide the physical response to anxiety. That helps us when we're encountering people with anxiety. Here's the third thing that my daughter taught me about anxiety. That is, we know there is a genetic component to anxiety. Now, this is researched, it's in data everywhere. But for me as a layperson, and I'm a teacher by trade, I did not understand that in familial DNA that anxiety gets passed on. And in my husband's family, there's a long lineage of anxiety. So had I known, maybe when she was younger, and I spotted her anxiety at about 3 years old when she was just, starting to interact with the world more. Had I recognized that there is a genetic component, maybe my radar would have been up. Here's the fourth thing now that my daughter taught me about anxiety. Anxiety can manifest itself physically. I hadn't recognized that before. And I was a teacher for like a good decade before I started to have children. So I'd been in the classroom and I didn't get that. But now I mentioned earlier that if you birth anxiety, if it's in your children, you have a better grasp of it. I could see physical changes in my daughter. And do you know, I can now tell across a room if she's anxious. And I could tell by the way she walks. There's a bit more of a waddle for her. On that psych unit where I worked, I could physically see anxiety once I tuned into it more. So let me give some examples. Facial expressions. Holy smokes, you can see it on a face. If you look carefully, you got to look. It's on a face. If you've got a child that you're trying to navigate with this, watch facial expressions. It just does this tense look. So what I learned about anxiety, watch for how it comes out physically. It is really hard to hide anxiety at debilitating levels from the outside if we are watching. And an interesting thing about this of how it can manifest physically is just to be aware of panic attacks. I'm not going to get into panic attacks right now. I have a great episode though on the podcast with a student of mine that literally had a 911 phone call that the doctor's office did because she had a panic attack and they didn't know what to do with her. But it was all rooted in anxiety. So another physical manifestation of anxiety leads to maybe panic attacks or lower level anxiety attacks. Also, there can be physical outbursts when it's not appropriate, physical responses to something. When my daughter was younger, she actually had terror over some social settings that were not rational, quote unquote. That's anxiety. And you could see that come out. And if I only knew what had been going on, I could have responded so much better.